Hey guys, what's up? It's me. So I just finished having a quick little playthrough of this game called Streetdog BMX. I was looking for like sports games, indie sports games, extreme sports games, what have you. Anything related to BMX, snowboarding, skateboarding, and not literal sports like say football, but like as in this kind of sports. Anyways, I stumbled upon Streetdog BMX when I was just doing a general search on Steam. Had a look at it and I was like, you know what, this looks alright. So I installed it, gave it a crack, and so far, it's actually pretty fun. It's simple, straight to the point, but fun. The controls, once you sort of wrap your head around it, like in other extreme sports games, it's like, yep, that clicks. And it's just a matter of practicing trial and error, trying new lines, trying a sequence of tricks until you pull it off and it's like, holy shit, that was the coolest thing I ever did. And this game, I feel like has that going for it, even in its demo state. And yes, this game is in a demo state right now. They're still doing a lot of work on it. They're listening to criticism. They've got, feedback coming at them a fair bit, both positive and negative. There's things that I like and things that I don't like about the game. But so far, they seem to be in the right direction with this one. When it comes to how the physics handle, it's somewhat arcadey, but not like super arcadey either. Like there's still a bit of weight and floatiness in the air when you pull off your tricks and when you go for manuals and grinds and whatnot. There is a certain amount of weight that you need to have that sort of satisfaction in BMX or skateboarding games where it feels like you've landed that trick. You feel like you've landed that, that hit on the ground. Whereas some games, they feel, very flat. It's the animations are like way too quick. And this one is a bit quicker than say the more realistic looking BMX games such as Pipe or BMX Streets, those ones that have a lot more going on in terms of the physics and also the, the tricks and the airtime of your BMX. This one is sort of like, landings are much more precise. You have to really land the bike properly and you have to make sure that your character has finished the trick before landing, otherwise you're just going to fall on the ground. And say if you're doing a manual on a platform, if you don't get off of it safely, you're just going to fall. Again, it's very easy to fall and make mistakes in this game. And then, you fall, you rest up, and you rest up by, landing at a previous point when you travel to where you're going. And you rinse and repeat this process until you get the thing right, whatever it is you're trying to do anyways. At the start in this demo, you have 5 different challenges you have to do that basically act as tutorials to sort of get your head around the game, so to speak. And they teach you the basic controls of each thing. So like, one is for learning how to brake and pedal. Another one could be to learn how to do air tricks, manuals and grinds, wall rides, what have you. What you get here is enough to cover everything that the game is going for. And from that point on, they have other things planned, more maps, more content, more challenges, more tricks utilized in the game to make it, feel arcadey, but still really fun to play, that also has sort of a skill ceiling of its own over time. In this one, you have a similar flick system, kind of like in the skate games, where you use, the right analog stick or the left analog stick. But in this one, all you have to do, say, like, a jump, is you just hold down and then release it, rather than, say, holding it down and then flicking up, like you would in other, skateboarding games, like, say, the Skate series, or Skater XL or Session Skate Sim. This one, it's as simple as just flicking it down, holding it, and then releasing it. There is, however, an option to make it more like those games, or to have an even more accessible and arcadey approach to the controls, which I really like so far. So there's ways where people have a more realistic sim feeling for the game, and those that want a much more simpler control scheme where they can still pull off really cool tricks. So it's just a matter of preference, but for this playthrough, I just kept it at normal, just to sort of see what they were going for with the default settings, because I imagine that with the default control scheme, they're sort of making the whole game with this control scheme in mind, and then they'll tweak the content, hopefully, for the other control schemes so that it's accessible either way. The character customization is there, but it's not like anything spectacular at the moment. There's definitely a lot more that could be added in, even to the point of, hey, say, like, add different skin colors or make your own custom skin color, kind of like what you can in the Tony Hawk's games, for instance, where you can just go all out with your design. Even different weight levels would be cool, just to sort of make a character stand out more, because every character looks kind of the same, no matter what kind of clothing you put on them, or what hairstyle you put on them, or piercing, what have you. And speaking of which, those options are pretty limited at the moment, but I'm hoping that they add a lot more options, because I'm not really vibing with any of the hairstyle choices whatsoever. I'm just kind of picking whatever it's like, yeah, I can ignore this, rather than thinking, oh, this character looks cool. And for me, that's not a very good sign. I want my character to look cool. Even if it looks goofy, I want it to look cool in its own way and have it stand out, whereas nothing really stands out here. And as for the art direction of the game, it's sort of growing on me, but I have seen other art styles that I personally prefer. In saying that though, I have come to appreciate more stylized games these days than photorealistic stuff, because it's like, I've seen it many, many times, and I know that at a certain point, those photorealistic looking games will eventually age worse when the next photorealistic experience comes along. But with stylized games, they feel timeless. Like, you look at Breath of the Wild, you could, go into a cryotube for 100 years, come back out and discover the game, and it will still look good, because they had an art direction that looks appealing and stands out in its own way, and isn't concerned at all with all the fidelity, but it's just to make everything look, elegant in its own way. And this game does have some of that, but as for the character models, I don't know, I'm very 50-50 on it. Like, environmentally, I don't mind it, it looks alright, and I can't wait to see what the rest of the environments look like. But as for the character models, I don't know, man, like, I'm not really vibing with it personally, but I guess that's just a matter of preference. But either way, I do appreciate that they are going for a more stylized approach to the visual presentation. As for the landings, in general, it seems to be very, very precise. Like, you hold a trick for too long, you'll just fall. Like, even if it felt like for a moment that, I only held right for a brief second, but it still initiates a double trick, which isn't really what I intended, and then I end up just failing. And as for how you initiate the tricks, I personally prefer the way you do it in Skate or the other games where, you hold down and then you initiate a trick with using the other stick personally. Because there are times where I say, I hold down on the right analog stick and then I try to do, say, like a bar spin, but it doesn't really do that move that I want it to do. It ends up doing something else, and that ends up being annoying, because there's times where I have a line in mind and I go for a jump and I try to do a bar spin, but it does an entirely different trick just because of how sensitive, like, sort of the inputs are for the tricks on the right analog stick. This leads to a lot of falls that I just, that really shouldn't have happened if I had done the right trick, or the trick that I had in mind. But who knows, like, in the future, I'll test the game again, with a different control scheme and see if it feels a lot better. But with the default scheme, I do prefer the way Skate does it personally, but that's just me. But overall, I had a pretty good time with Streetdog BMX. I really like what's going on with this game. Again, I appreciate the presence of more stylized sports games. I feel like there should be way more of them than more photorealistic looking ones. You don't have to always play the latest, like photorealistic soccer game or basketball game or whatever. Sometimes even a more stylized approach, makes for a more fun experience, in my opinion, or at least it just spins things up, spins it up. And that's what this game does for at least the BMX scene of, BMX games, is instead of making the most realistic physics in a BMX game, it's like, hey, why don't we just make BMX riding fun, give it some cartoony graphics on top of it, so that way it doesn't, age worse over time and kind of just, stays as its own, visual appearance. Having a replay editor that you can also, filter out and edit gives players an opportunity to create some really cool clips, and then they can upload those clips on YouTube, which some have already done, pulling off their own lines. And I feel like that as the game progresses, as more people play the demo, and when the final product comes out, when the game's in a more complete state, players are going to do a lot of nutty shit with this game. Like, I'm looking forward to seeing that. Kind of like what you're already seeing in Skate. I'm looking forward to seeing what, more stuff gets added into this, and what other kind of features are going to be utilized or featured in. Hell, maybe even some mod support might add a bit more flair to it. I mean, you can't go wrong with that. Just look at Skater XL. It's the main reason why people still play it to this day, at least in the PC community. But yeah, that's another can of worms. But yeah, if you're looking for a BMX experience, besides from just more skateboarding, then yeah, give Streetdog BMX a go. It's pretty fun. Thanks for watching, guys. See you soon.